Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey everybody, welcome to Paranormal Karen. I'm so excited. I have two things today to do. I have to interview a voodoo priestess and talk to an accountant, and I can't even begin to tell you how afraid I am of the accountant. So excited about today's show. You guys, a quick reminder, if you can go to my website and sign up for my email list. I'm staying off of Facebook and Twitter for a while so I can let you know about upcoming events, or even better, follow me on Instagram at Rontowski. Today's guest, Lilith Dorsey, so much I want to talk about. And in comedy, when you do an intro and someone has so many credits, sometimes it's easier just to say, I couldn't do this intro justice. That's what I feel like right now. Voodoo priestess, Santeria, witchcraft, workshops, tarot, filmmaker, books. I'm going to start with your books, Lilith. Orisha, Goddess and Voodoo Queens, book number 2, Love Magic, book number 3, Voodoo and Afro-Caribbean Paganism, number 4, 55 Ways to Connect to Goddess, and number 5, African American Ritual Cookbook. Tell me, how did you get started on, let's say, your spiritual path? Was it part of your family? Was it individual interest? What happened?
Oh, okay. I can explain that. Let me start by saying it's Orisha's. You told me to tell you.
And I got it wrong. That's how I am.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, I think my parents named me Lilith, which is something that I think a lot of people who are new to dealing with me are kind of surprised about, so I've been walking around with that name my whole life.
I love that.
And so there was a very spiritual upbringing. It wasn't anything formalized, but it was something that definitely honored the goddess in all her forms, honored nature. And I think my parents totally instilled an alternative religious way of thinking for me. So when I got to college, I started off doing film, and then I ended up doing anthropology because I left when I was pregnant with my daughter. And when I was doing anthropology, I did a lot of anthropology of religion. And one of my professors said to me, there's no such thing as divination in the United States. There's no such thing as witchcraft. And I knew that was completely and totally wrong. So I decided I wanted to prove this white-splaining, mansplaining teacher of mine wrong. And really start writing about it. Like I said, I had always practiced sort of casually, but I wanted to delve more deeply and more formally, both academically and personally, into the religion. And we started the Oshun newsletter, I want to say back in 90 or 91. It was very early, and we wanted to provide accurate and informative information about the Orishas and the Loas and all the African traditional religions that were not as open and spoken about as they are today. And shortly after, I met my priestess Miriam from the Voodoo Spiritual Temple here in New Orleans, and I've been with her for 28 years now. So it's been a beautiful ride.
And you actually have films that they show at Harvard. I read that in your bio. Is that also on this same topic?
Yes. When I did my graduate work at NYU in film, it was documentary production was the program. I made a documentary about Priestess Miriam. I was speaking about it the other day because it's called Bodies of Water, and I made it before Katrina, and it's how the water influences the religion. So it talks about Priestess Miriam and my journey to the religion. And at that time, I was living in Brooklyn, where I'm from. So it talked about the Hudson River and the ocean and the Mississippi River and how all these things influence the character of the religion.
Wow. Now, I always thought, and this is a weird offshoot, but they always found that serial killers tend to stay on the West Coast. They always stayed towards water states, and Florida has that surrounding by water. So water influences in so many different ways, doesn't it?
It does. Our bodies are mostly made up of water. Actually, my next book, Water Magic, which is out in October, is all about water and all the different sacred forms and how it influences people.
And I love it. Okay, so the book that you just put out that I mispronounced right away, it's I love that that topic is out because people hear voodoo and they hear scary or they hear what's moved. It's been so misrepresented, don't you think?
Definitely. In the media, there's a lot of misconceptions. I think that the public mindset, when all you see is Marie Laveau in American Horror Story or hear about some song written by Shel Silverstein, it doesn't have the same kind of depth and respect really that the religion brings to somebody wonderful like Marie Laveau. You know, I really wanted to focus on the voodoo queens in the book too. That's why it's part of the title. And there have been so many amazing voodoo queens in New Orleans, but through public perception, they're just demonized and highly sexualized. And in reality, that doesn't have anything to do with the religion.
Yeah, it's not to totally diss on Christianity, but it's almost like the Christianity sets out to, or at least it did, to demonize anything else that comes in. Get rid of anything
Of course.
else. Yeah.
Of course.
And you do a great blog on there was Voodoo Universe is your blog, correct?
Yes.
And you talk about the difference between voodoo and hoodoo.
Yeah, I think this is a misconception, especially for people that are new to the tradition. Voodoo, which is what we call it here in New Orleans, or Vodou, as it is called in Haiti, where it's been practiced since the very beginning of Haiti. They are religions, really. And I think that people think of them as cults because a lot of times there's a priest or a priestess, a mambo or a hungan that has a lot of personality. And in reality, again, it's something so far from that. It's more operates like a family, and the priest and the priestess guide the people that go there like their children. They advise them on everything: health, spirituality, everything, money matters, financial matters, everything like that. Whereas hoodoo is much more of a folk magic. I don't know how many of your listeners are witches, but to me, it's kind of like a hedge witch practice. And that would be, okay, well, the rent's coming due and I need some money. So if I take this leaf and I put it under the rug, then that way money will come to me and it'll come inside my house and I'll be able to pay the rent or the mortgage or whatever it is that month. So it's more practical oriented solutions for immediate problems based on what's around in the area, pretty much. Whereas voodoo, we have initiations and feasts, and it's all about honoring the Loa, or in Ifa or Santo, it's all about honoring the Orisha. So there are those similarities that it's definitely initiation based, and it's more of spiritual kind of study as opposed to just practical magic.
Yeah, and one's more of a community. It's interesting because someone corrected me on this once, but I always feel like everything is safe if you don't dabble. Like if you don't, like I did dabble in a fairy spell once with people and it went very wrong. And so voodoo is it's more of a community. It really is a church. Do you guys have one god, or it's a universe as one, or several goddesses? Can you tell me more about that?
I think it varies from person to person. There are certainly practicing Christians that are also voodoo people. And in Haiti, a lot of them ascribe to Bondi, which means good God. So they have this sort of monotheistic concept of deity. But then there's also the Loa, which work day to day to help us through certain situations. So it's kind of both. Whereas a lot of people, especially in this country, have had really bad experiences with Christianity. And when they serve only the Loa and things like that. So it really is a personalized religion. And it, as I said, it goes based on the spiritual house you belong to. There's no real one right authority and things like that on the religion. So it's based on person to person, really how it's done. And I can't say one way or another, oh, this person has one God and that's wrong, or this person has the Loas and they only worship them and they don't worship God and that's wrong. I think everybody finds their own unique, proper way to navigate the religion and to still honor what they feel is right.
I love that. You know, I did see something on TV, two weird off questions, but most of my questions are off. But that's why I love I saw how like media savvy you were. Cause sometimes people, when I email them, they need a list of the questions and we're going to stick to them. And you were like, meh, not afraid of anything. Just ask me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a tarot reader and a Reiki master, although I don't do Reiki really much anymore. I feel like for people to heal now, there is something different going on. There's therapy, that's great, but you have to go mind, body, and spirit now. And one of the things I get very stuck on when I talk about energy work is I think people can heal their mind and their soul, but if they sort of don't get that vibration out of their cells, it's not going to help. And I notice in voodoo there's a lot of body movement. Do you know? Can you explain to me the purpose behind that, or am I way off on a tangent here?
No, I think you're correct. I think that there are a lot of sacred dances that we do that are very much an intrinsic part of the religion, and also sacred rhythms and songs, and all of those in conjunction work to heal an individual and also to heal the community and to give people what they need. I make the distinction, not necessarily what they want, because sometimes what they want isn't necessarily what they need in that moment. So, and as a dancer, I know you said I have a long bio. I'm also a dancer and a choreographer for, well, the late Dr. John, who passed a year ago on June 6th. And I got to do the sacred dances with him at Jazz Fest and at Bonnaroo. And it was so beautiful to be able to put those kinds of rituals in the context of a performance with someone who's so loved and so revered and so powerful. And I miss him terribly. But it was interesting to me because I was used to doing ritual. And don't get me wrong, I had done rituals for 300, 400, 500 people, but being up on stage at Bonnaroo, we were looking at thousands and thousands of people. So it was interesting for me to be able to bring spirituality through dance to that many people at one time.
It's the movement of energy. Yeah.
It is. It is.
That's can we see that on YouTube? Is there a video of that if we go to your channel?
There is video of me performing with him in Brooklyn at a much smaller venue, but the Bonnaroo footage was supposed to be turned into a documentary, and to my knowledge, it never really was. So, problematic.
Yeah.
And things get more problematic after somebody dies. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, red tape, everything. Okay, so you also, in the second half too, I want to start with your workshops and stuff. You do a lot, you talk about food and magic, and I love, you were making a pomegranate salad and connecting it to the High Priestess card, which I love. Tell me how you use food in, shall we say, in a magical way.
Well, thank you. I know you said you're a tarot reader, and I did a series on tarot and food where there was a recipe for each of the major arcana cards. And for me, food is so important. I grew up in a very foodie type household. My daughter has worked for Michelin star chefs. It's always been something that's really important to me. And I think that it's sublime, really, because people can have something magical with their breakfast. Or as I was mentioning with the tarot and food series, I came up with it because somebody had come to me and I had done a reading for them, and they were having a lot of problems with their teenage son who was autistic. And one of the few solutions that we could come up with to help him through his difficult points was to put some of these magical herbs and things into his food in order to bring him the calm and the peace and the space that he really needed in order to thrive under those circumstances. And to me, it doesn't matter if somebody is 2 years old. It doesn't matter if somebody's 100 years old. It doesn't matter if somebody's disabled. They still need to nourish their body. And I think that with mindfulness and permission, that it's a good way to administer a magical spell for somebody.
Yeah, interesting. You know, I feel like people are going towards, it's funny because I worked with an energy archaeologist a little while ago, and it's funny, all of a sudden, spiritual people with plant backgrounds that I find. I mean, I know we have herbalists and stuff, but it seems to be almost incorporated in. And I feel like that's where people are going right now. They want to grow their own food. They want their own herbs, that kind of thing. It really is important. And also, I just was talking to a friend who he always says, say I love you to your food. Put it right in that right vibration. I just found that whole food. And you do workshops with food, right?
I do. I've done magical herb workshops where we talk about incorporating them into food. I've done ancestor cooking workshops where we talk about making the favorite recipes for your ancestors as a means of honoring them and keeping their spirit alive in your home and among your family and community. And I've done aphrodisiac workshops related to my love magic book, again, with permission, but how to share dishes with those that you love and really capitalize on using the foods that you're going to be eating anyway in a magical way. And I really think it's just so important. It's so important. And you're right. Everybody is jumping on that bandwagon now. We all have time now. So everybody's discovered cooking and everyone's discovered gardening. Some of us knew about it all along, but that's okay.
Little ahead of the curve, right? There's also an interesting thing right now that keeps coming up, and it's coming up in my astrology. And you mentioned ancestors, and there is something about clearing. I feel like where I keep pointing everybody towards November, that there's some sort of a switch after November where we're moving out of that age of into the age of Aquarius, and sort of we're in the switch now. We're in that the contractions of the birth now, so to speak. And there's the phrase that keeps coming up is clearing ancestral karma. And I've been trying to put my finger on, do you have a good definition of that?
I think it's definitely a topic that a lot of people are thinking about now and trying to find solutions and ways to make that happen. I don't think there's an easy answer, unfortunately. I think it takes both thought and divination and magical practice, and most importantly, action towards getting those things done. I agree with you that some big things are coming in the next few months. I don't think I've talked to a single spiritual person who hasn't had that sort of feeling, message, vibration come to them very recently, that things are changing and hopefully for the better. But I suppose we'll see.
Do you worry at all about New Orleans, like the land? Like after, I know Katrina happened, and it seems like things are back on track. But do you worry about it? I know I read for several people there that are feeling worried about New Orleans, and they kind of feel like soon enough is going to be the time to move.
Well, I just moved to New Orleans, so I'm probably not the best person to ask about that really at this moment. But yes, we have to accept that there are certain things that, the city is below sea level, that climate change has made it 100 degrees in the Arctic Circle, that there are so many ways that the planet is changing. And it's hard to keep up with it, really, especially when there's so many other things that are happening, too, that we're dealing with on top of it, really. So I do worry about New Orleans, but I worry about everything that's happening, and in every level and every kind of way. And I don't mean that to diminish things. I think sometimes people hear me say that and they think I'm trying to diminish it. But for everybody who's out there, getting hurt and not making it home because of whatever reason, that makes me sad. For whatever person who doesn't have a home, that makes me sad. And there could be a lot more people who don't have homes if there's some sort of weather event in New Orleans. But like I said, I'm not any more worried about that than I am anything else. The murder hornets or.
Yes, I'm out in California, and we know we have a big earthquake coming. But also, you may have gone to New Orleans. It's very interesting. I feel like I'm supposed to be in California. I see people leaving, and I don't know what the purpose is, but for whatever during this change, I feel like I'm supposed to be here. So maybe you're supposed to be there. I was having some some money issues about, I really want to buy a trailer. I know that's not everyone's dream to get a trailer, but it's mine. And my money issues, I tend to keep giving away. And one day during a meditation, I was sort of sat down and said, no, we're giving you the money. We want you to have a trailer. You're supposed to be on the land. You're going to get your trailer. So maybe New Orleans, you're supposed to be there for some other reason that maybe others are afraid or moving out of. Which of your books would be, if someone really wanted to get started in voodoo and really learn it from the ground up, what book would you suggest?
That's an interesting question. I would probably suggest Orisha's Goddesses and Voodoo Queens, the brand new one, because that has a lot of stuff that's very introductory. It also has stuff that's advanced for people that could have been practicing the traditions for decades. But I think it gives them a decent overview. I think there's a lot of advice in there, like how to find a priest or a priestess to study with, how to join a house, what kinds of things are okay under the circumstances. You mentioned before, some things can be dangerous. There's a lot of powerful magic. And I don't say that to scare somebody. The same way if somebody was cooking with something like the fugu fish that could be poisonous if you don't cut it the right way. There's a lot of things in the religion that can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So I think that that's a very good overview. I also recommend my book, Voodoo and Afro-Caribbean Paganism, but it's been out of print for a while. We're working on getting it reprinted, hopefully by the beginning of next year. But if you find one in a used bookstore, snap it up because it's going for quite a bit right now.
Oh, wow. I have the bookstore that I think it's magical bookstore up the street from me. It has everything, and it's out of a movie where you can barely move because so many books are there. I'm going to go look right away. Well, that's an interesting topic, is people that dabble. Do people often come to you? I have a friend that they're investigators and they help out, and he's actually a demonologist, so he knows kind of a lot about many things, and they had someone who all of a sudden had spirits, right? He was in a guest house, and all of a sudden the spirits were showing up, and they were people, and he had no mediumship experience, and they were giving him names and places and saying, you got to go tell our kids this and that and all this stuff. And he wasn't into this, but he was checking it out. It was all on key. And he finally figured out he was an artist, and he found a voodoo symbol that he made it and put it on a tree, and it ended up, he just thought, as an artist, he was like, I really like this. And apparently it was something that opened a door for spirits to come through. So they had to move that. Do you have people that come to you with sort of problems like that you have to sort of reverse engineer and figure out how to fix?
Yes, I do. And my first question is usually, what'd you do that for?
I know, right? I don't know. I didn't believe. Right. They just dabble.
Yeah.
That's
I have a lot of time that I have spent being around younger people, and one of my younger friends likes me to tell him stories about when my uncle stuck red hots up his nose, and the punchline of the story is, "What'd you do that for?"
Exactly. Human beings have this. We really don't, we're not going to get in trouble. We know God, this will be fine. Let's try this. Mm-hmm. But have you ever does it ever scare you?
Well, there's definitely been times where scary things happened to me and around me. And I usually, I'm not one of these people that's somebody tells me something has, spirit activity. I'm rushing in there and, shaking a machete or whatever, back to that old Southern saying, don't start none, there won't be none. Right. But I think that, yes, of course, if it was somewhere that somebody I loved was there and I needed to help them, then I would do that. But I don't go looking for trouble. I try really hard not to. I have enough problems as it is, but yes, there are people who open up cans of worms who don't really realize what they're doing. Or, I've had people tell me they got offerings confused and stuff like that. And, I really think people should think, yes, I said action is necessary, but thought is also necessary as well. And if you're not being informed by somebody or you're not being guided by somebody, that's why it has the tradition that it does. That's why you have godparents, because you can say, oh, I have this situation. Do you think it would be okay to do this? Do you think it would be okay to do this? I just had somebody send me a message this morning, can I make up what herbs I need for my own spell? I was like, well, you can, but you don't necessarily know what that's going to do. Right. I always equate it to food. Some people are allergic to peanuts. Some people eat peanuts 3 times a day. So it's going to have a different reaction on every single different person. And this is why we have guides. This is why we have divination. This is why we do all these things that we do. And I think there's a certain level of humility that goes in it too, which I'm not seeing a lot of recently, that there's a lot of people who I appreciate that they have gifts, and I want them to celebrate their gifts, but having a gift is different than studying and practicing and learning for decades.
Yeah, there's it's funny because even in the beginning when I heard you put a leaf under the rug for money, I wonder how many people by now already have a leaf under their rug without, without going through the whole background. Now, love spells. Tell me about that book, because I know everyone is going to be jumping at that.
Yeah, I think that it suffered a lot because people thought it was all about, oh, well, I take my partner's hair and I sew it up and I stick it in my underwear and something like that, and then they'll love me forever. I put a story in the book. My friend and I, we call it the Gotta Have Pat story. And it was about somebody that he knew who had done every spell in the book in order to get this person to be his boyfriend. And he had an altar to the person. He had stuff from the person, and the person didn't want to settle down with him. And when he finally did enough spell work and everything, they settled down together, and they were both dead from AIDS within 3 months after that. So sometimes you think you know what is best for you, but it might not be best for you in the situation. So that's why we do divination, because you need to see, is this really what's best for you in the situation? And when I do love spells for people, what I do is ask them to get a reading first, because yes, maybe you like this person that you've been involved with for a while, but maybe there's a better person just around the corner. And if you move past this, you'll be able to see that somebody better is out there for you. So the book is on asking the universe for the best person, the best possible situation for you at the time, and bringing that to you.
Which is such a exactly what you said. I hope everyone will rewind and hear that again, because especially a lot of times with my readings, I get people that are very fixated on it's either A or B. What is it going to be, Karen? And I'm like, well, it looks like it's going to be C. And they're like, there's no C. And I'm like, no. And then sure enough, a month later, oh, it was answer C. But people get fixated on someone. And I love the way you worded that, which is to send out for the best person, not this person.
Yes, I agree. And I think that it's very easy to get fixated on someone. And I've got spells in the book for that. What should you do? I've got prayers and rituals and things about, okay, how can I refocus my mind to, I want the best thing for me. I want the universe to give me clarity and insight and direction, so I know how to get that and how to achieve that as easily as possible.
That's fantastic. You know what, folks? Hang on. We're going to be right back. We're going to move on to Santeria, and I can't wait. Hang on. It's me doing a little ad for myself because I always forget to do it during the podcast. I will be doing a Facebook Live on August 26th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's about my tarot class. If you've already taken it, you might want to tune in. I have a couple of new things to put out there. Also, if you haven't taken it and you're on the fence, come on in, see what it's all about. We'll also have a little special takeaway if you tag somebody and bring them in on the viewing, and I will be taking your questions. So that's August 26th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Also, Halloween falls on a weekend this year, and I am going to be in Nauvoo, 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 Illinois. This is why I need a husband, to just tell me how to say that. That's all I want him to do, and then he can go home. At the Cambry House. So Cambrehouse. It's going to be a great weekend. I'm going to be there with the Southern Gypsies, which is a whole group of mediums and psychics. We're going to be doing readings on Saturday. There's a meet and greet Friday night. We're going to be investigating the Kingsley Inn, and they also have rooms available at the Kingsley. It's going to be a great Halloween weekend. Check it out at cambrehouse.com. All right, let's get back to the podcast. Okay, we're back. Okay, now Lilith, you're going to have to school me on this because I have had several experiences with Santeria, not me personally, but I feel like this is something that's very popular in California. And again, people either not knowing the background and it's very, very much used I have two stories or three, I think, that I'd love to ask you about after. Tell me the basis of Santeria, and give me a good positive swing before I get into all the people that seem to be doing revenge or controlling spells, if that makes sense.
Okay, so let me start out by saying that in the tradition, it's called La Regla Lacumi, or Santo. It's really only Santeria in the media.
Oh,
so
I told you you're going to have to correct me on a bunch of things. Okay, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I appreciate your asking. I really do. Sometimes I have interviews and I try and get it in there, and whoever I'm talking to just glosses over it. So okay. I really appreciate that. It comes primarily from right now, it comes primarily from Cuba. That's where it's been based for the past couple of 100 years. The original priests and information and things like that came primarily from the Yoruba people in West Africa. And it's been practiced for hundreds of years, even before there was a Cuba. It was practiced in different variations and stuff like that. So it gets a bad rap because, like anything else, it was a religion of enslaved people, a religion of colonized people. So there are a heavy number of spells that focus on, as you said, revenge or curses, because they were an oppressed people in every way, on every level. So magic was one of the tools that they had in their arsenal to fight back against all this oppression and injustice that they were suffering. Lots of times they weren't allowed to practice in any way. So it went underground. So again, that made it much more difficult for things to come to light. But for me, like all of the ATRs or African traditional religions, there really is a beauty to it. There is a heavy focus on the ancestors and honoring your ancestors and honoring those who come before. There are weekly prayers, and for some there are daily prayers where you remember all your ancestors, both in your physical blood lineage and your spiritual lineage, and pay them offerings and give them tribute and things like that. I think it gets a bad rap because of the animal sacrifice. And I say this as someone who was a vegetarian for years. It gets a bad rap because of the animal sacrifice, I think, because people are really not fully aware of the fact that the sacrifices are done as humanely as possible. Very often, depending on the circumstance, but most often the meat is eaten or cooked and donated to the homeless or something like that. So it's a very honoring way of having animals as an offering. And when people still have arguments with me, as they do, I had one woman in leather shoes argue with me about animal sacrifice. And to me, it's if somebody told you that your child or your parent or your partner was going to die without medicine from a chicken gizzard or something, would you agree to use that medicine? And most people are like, yes, of course. So for us, this is spiritual medicine, and it has the same kind of importance. And if you don't believe that, then you don't really believe in what it is we're talking about. And that's a whole nother problem.
And that is a very interesting, because I am a vegan, I'm an animal rights person, and my belief is I kind of love the argument you gave, because my argument is, why are we using testing for makeup? And probably what you're saying is the slaughterhouses are that is where the violence and you know what I mean? And it's
Yes.
not all used. And as an animal rights person, I'm always like, let's just do one step at a time. Let's get it. You know what I mean? You can't throw all that at once. But I actually feel kind of enlightened by what you told me there with how it's used and how the animal is honored, almost like the American Indians used to.
Yes, definitely. And I think that, again, that's something that a lot of people miss. I know several practitioners of ATRs that don't do any animal sacrifice. I've only done it under certain circumstances, with the assistance of a priest and things like that. So it's definitely not done lightly. And some houses even say you have to be willing to give your own life for that particular cause that you're, making the sacrifice for. And people are willing to do that. So I think, again, when people really realize that this is what's going on, I'd be willing to die in order to make sure, my child was healthy my parents, it's a whole nother story, but you get what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah.
Those that I love. Yes.
And I do have a friend that practices Santeria, and we've sort of hit a wall with this. So I thank you for that explanation. And if my animal rights friends are going crazy, go back to what I said. Let's start with you know what I mean? Let's start in a different position, because people are going to eat meat forever. But I always feel like the farmer that had the cow, and the cow had a great life, and then they ate it. There's something about that seems okay to me. It's these slaughterhouses and, hormones and all that. But anyways, so, thank you.
Well, yeah. Oh, and I wanted to say this too. I mean, because you're right. I know there's still going to be people with objections out there. Every time I've ever been at a ceremony where somebody bought birds or things like that, the birds, if I go to the supermarket, I pay $5 or $6 for a chicken. These birds, they have to be live. They're usually kept in somebody's yard. People pay 5 times that in order to have a chicken delivered for these kinds of ceremonies, because it's frowned upon in a lot of communities. So that chicken probably has a much better life than, again, the one that you even find, for sale in the fancy store.
Right. And somewhere there's a whole spiritual that I am not acquired enough yet of why they're here. Some of them are here for that purpose. You know what I mean? But
right.
But anyways, thank you for clearing that up. So also, isn't Santeria somehow it connects with Catholic saints at the same time?
There is a lot of what we call syncretism, which is blending on some level. I think a lot of it began during colonial times and enslaved people's times, the hundreds of years that went on, where people were forced to hide some of the elements of the religion under Christianity. Many times slaves weren't allowed to have books. If they did, they were allowed to have the Bible. So this is something that they used as a magical text. They weren't allowed to have African statues, even if you could find them, which they only became available very recently. So they would use Catholic statues, and these statues were hollow, and they're still hollow today. And what they would do is put the sacred herbs and ritual items inside the statues. So then if somebody came by, it looked like they were praying to a statue of the Madonna or a statue of Diosa del Mar, as opposed to Yemaya or Emanja or one of the other variations of that energy in the tradition.
Oh, fascinating. Wow. It's amazing how much history needs to be brought out. I'll just leave that statement there. That's fascinating. I did not know that. Okay, so I have three things I would like to, and you're welcome to just go, I don't know, pass, or maybe you do know what's going on. The first one is a very simple. I was doing Reiki on a woman, and before I even began, she was laying on the table, and something like popped out at me, and it sort of like the interpretation of the feeling I got of what it did is it waved a finger at me like, you better, it wasn't like you better do this right, but it was almost like we're watching. And it wasn't scary, but I felt like something warned me. And then I had said to her after the Reiki session, which went well, I said, does anybody in your family practice Santeria? Or I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing it wrong. And she said, oh grandfather was the high priest in Cuba. And I thought my interpretation of that was kind of good, that she said he told me to always wear this ring, that there was a protective spirit around her that was just going, hey, just be careful. Does that sound accurate at all?
Definitely, especially if her grandfather was in the tradition. There were probably rituals and things like that that were done for her when she was young. There were certainly protections put on the ring. I think that also, which is one of the reasons I wrote a couple of my books about this topic, was that in Santo or Lakumi, there are a lot of things having to do with the body. For example, people aren't supposed to touch the top of your head under any circumstances.
Okay.
So
which
in
was
that
immediately
context,
where my hands were.
Yeah, in that context, it would have been like a be careful warning, because she's not supposed to have the top of her head touched, because for us, that's kind of where the Orisha go in and out, and where the whatever center of spirit is, and that's where people get cleansed. And if somebody's been cleansed and then somebody touches it, they got to go get cleansed all over again. So.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Also, one time on one of your videos, I saw this. You were talking about cleansing the back of your neck, which in paranormal investigation, we always found that's an entrance point. If you're in a haunted location and something's trying to get in, you'll feel that scratch behind the back of your neck. Is that sort of the same thinking when you were talking about cleansing negativity out of there?
Right. That's usually the place where when somebody undergoes possession, that's where it's thought of the spirit goes in and out the back of your neck. So I usually recommend people cleanse the back of their neck, because that allows only whatever is necessary, whatever is beneficial, whatever is positive to enter into their spirit. And I will say this, since I have mentioned possession before, in most cases, it's a positive thing. It's not like the media says. It's not like a bad, negative thing. It's usually to help heal the person and also to bless the community. So it's sort of giving over your energy and your body for a time in order to allow the Orisha or the Loa to come in and get their work done.
Oh, okay. And when you do, yes, because I enjoyed that tape too. It was very interesting. So you were saying on it that it's not demonic possession. It's perhaps in your religion, would it be sort of what people now kind of consider channeling? And when you do that, do you go, I'm addressing this specific goddess, or does it just happen?
It's a little bit of both. I know a lot of modern practitioners that are incorporating trance and possession into their practices will sit there and say, okay, now I'm ready to receive whoever or whomever specific god or goddess that they're trying to connect with. But for us, it's more like we have a feast or we have a ceremony. There's an order of service. So usually it will start with Legba or Elegua, then it'll move through to whichever Loa or Orisha are going to be honored at that time. So normally if a possession happens during that, it's usually according to the script, mind you. I guess that's the best way I can explain it. You know, if Erzuli comes in, or Erzuli Frida, and somebody's dancing and drinking champagne and things like that, most likely somebody would get possessed by Erzuli Frida at that time and not another one. There are instances where somebody, is not necessarily called and they show up to a party, and then you have to decide what to do about that. The same way as if it was a physical person you didn't necessarily invite showed up to the party. Well, are they okay? Are they going to play nice? Like, do we have anything for them to eat? Like, that's what usually happens.
You always want to feed your guests. Yes. Which another, like I said, I feel like I could talk to you all day with a million questions. And I have been getting a lot of people that seem to feel like something like this is happening involuntarily all of a sudden. And what would you suggest for somebody like that is perhaps it's just happening to, which I kind of feel like I don't know if it should just be happening organically in someone's life. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. And it shouldn't necessarily be happening organically in somebody's life. I talk about it in the book that there are rituals and ceremonies that we go through in all the different traditions in order to make sure somebody is cleansed and protected, and only the things that are supposed to get in. Because, as you know, there's lots of things floating around out there. The same way you wouldn't leave your door open to whoever walked by in the street, you shouldn't leave your body and your mind and your spirit open to whatever energy might be walking around. So that's why we see that as something that's not welcome. And before, I remember I used to feel so bad. I would go to ceremonies before I joined the tradition, and I'd feel that feeling of something maybe coming in the back of my neck, and a little dizzy, a little nauseous. And they would remove me from the space and put me in a separate room and give me a glass of water. It was like, no, you open the door for somebody we didn't invite. And I would get so sad about it, but I knew that was what had to be. And it only made me want to rush out and get my initiations and get those things in place as soon as possible.
Fascinating. So something saw you as either permeable or not having boundaries. How does someone stop that for my clients that are kind of like, I don't know what's going on? Is it boundary setting? Is it keeping aura clean, all the regular protection, witchcraft, or do you have a book to recommend for that?
There's a lot of posts that I have on the blog, Voodoo Universe, that people can check about cleansing yourself, protecting yourself. You know, I'm much more fond of centering oneself as opposed to grounding, because in the HERs, we have a different sense of geometry. It's sort of like the up is not up and down is not down. It's more about measuring distance as opposed to actual location of which way you're going. So I kind of appreciate centering more, because that just means you're where you need to be for your body, not necessarily nailed into the ground wherever you are. And I think that that's an important distinction. But yes, there are plenty of things you can do if you feel like that's both for your space. A lot of times when I have clients, I find that their space is not protected properly, especially where they sleep, or their bed or something is not protected properly. And then in the same way that you about like leaving the door open, either that or they'll have somebody that's very negative that's living in the same space as them, which is a whole nother set of problems, as you know.
Interesting. You already just gave some foresight to one of my last questions. I always tell people, whether it's tarot or whatever you're doing, learn protection first. There's go to Lilith's blog, or there's a book called Witch's Shield. I must have sold 1,000 copies of that book just by going protect yourself first. Okay, so here is an odd. Like I said, this may not even apply. You might be like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I have a friend whose boyfriend is in Germany. He was going through a divorce. When he was with his ex-wife and things were okay, but they were moving towards a divorce, she knew she was moving to Brazil, and she sent a package to Brazil that he didn't know about. The package didn't make it. There was like one thing wrong, and it came back. All the package was a T-shirt with his semen on it.
Okay.
And does that make? Was she setting that up to do something, a spell or something, or does it make any sense?
No, it totally makes sense. I mean, the best thing you can have for a spell is somebody's bodily fluids, especially a love spell, somebody's semen or something like that. So she was obviously trying to do some kind of magic on him. I would guess some kind of binding magic or some kind of controlling magic under those circumstances. What do I have to say about that? Be careful with your stuff.
I know.
Especially be careful with, both his T-shirt and the other stuff. Because once it's out there. You can't, sort of cut the cords between you and a piece of your clothing. It's better to hold on to your clothing and make sure nobody's taken anything from you. I had an ex once, I caught him stealing my jewelry. I was like, okay. And my favorite story about that is I had a friend who passed, and we had to go get all the objectionable stuff out of his storage, the stuff he didn't want his parents to see. And we ended up opening a giant treasure chest full of women's panties, all different size women's panties. And we were like, okay, it was marked art supplies. I was like, okay.
Wow. What kind of art are you making? Wow.
I know. So
wow.
I thought that was was hilarious, but he's since passed.
And
But
so,
again, it's hard once it's already done, it's hard to get it back. So I just sort of recommend to people that they be cautious and mindful and careful about who they're engaging with. I mean, is somebody trying to steal your underwear? Well, maybe that's not a good person to be with.
right. There was another, and that I said to her, I said, I think his guides were working a little overtime to get that package back. And there's another gentleman that was having trouble with a female, and he immediately said, no, she's gone. And I said, look under your bed. And she had specifically left 2 water bottles there. And I don't know if that was an accident. It seemed a little bit purposeful, but I'm not sure what that one is. There must be water magic also, correct?
Sure, of course. Like I said, my next book coming out is all about water magic.
Oh,
so water is very powerful, and you can use it for a lot of different things. I mean, if there wasn't anything personal in there, I would think it was more of a generalized kind of magic, but who knows? People making stuff up now. So I have no idea.
People are improvising all over the place.
They are.
Okay.
They really are.
So this one...
But yeah, check under your bed, check under your pillow. If you're the first time you're spending the night with someone, keep an eye on them. That's a good idea anyway, even just practically. Are they trying to look in your wallet? Are they trying to look in your underwear drawer? What's happening?
Be alert.
Yes.
So, all right. So another really interesting case, and I'm going to try and keep the people straight on this case. I called it. I didn't mean that. So my friend's nephew, his father is a police officer. Okay. And was getting a divorce. Okay, and the woman, his ex-wife, is who we think that something is going on. He comes to my house for a reading, and I'm going to be very specific here. She paid for it, because when you get a reading with me, you have to pay online before you get your reading. And he came over. The minute he walks in, my dog, who never barks and is never wrong, starts chasing and barking something that's following him. And I'm thinking, police officer, they get followed a lot, could just be something, not alarmed. At the end of the reading, he starts shuffling, and I don't know where my wallet is. I don't think I can get to ATM to pay you. And I was like, no, your sister got it. But in my mind, I'm going, okay, I see what you thought you were going to do. You thought you were going to come here and then walk out without paying. You're a police officer. So that's kind of just to set up who he is. There's been trouble with his son not trouble, but, and he has a very enormous background of, that is not about him being a bad person, but a lot of strange things around him from when he was born. So as the son is going to the ex-wife and coming home, the ex-wife is tying knots in the shoelaces that are exactly 1 inch apart. And the son has always said someone is watching him. And now that the kid is a little older, he's having trouble sleeping because he says someone is watching him. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you can use knot magic for anything. So that's kind of not really enough to go on, I think, because she could have tied anything into those knots.
So she was
depending
binding
on what her intent was.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be a protection thing. That's where the watching could come from. I wish people would tell kids when they do things, because then it would make them a little less freaked out about it when it happens, because anybody thinks something's watching them. They're going to be a little bit nervous. Right. It doesn't necessarily sound malicious. It could just be that she was tying the energy onto him so she could make sure he was okay. It could be something worse,
Okay, great. So that has a big tail to it. I believe his mother was from El Salvador, and his birth was during, maybe it wasn't El Salvador, pardon me with geography and whatnot, but when he was born, there was a war going on. There was something there. In other words, his parents were immigrants, very poor. And when he was born, they lived in a tin hut because I guess as refugees or whatever, that's all there was. There was a scratching on the roof when he was born, and when he was born, the mother yelled, "You're not going to take him." Then in the day when they got up, there were a bunch of dead chicks. They didn't know what they died of. They were just sort of sprawled there. So that was sort of his coming into the world. And since then, he's had a lot of just very odd, paranormal, not comfortable experiences. Would you be someone that, would you be able to help him if he was afraid, or give him some direction, and remember, get your money first. But would that be a client that would come to you that you could maybe give some direction to, or does it not make sense at all? You need the whole story.
I would usually recommend somebody like that would need a reading. Like I said, there's a lot of things on the blog that people could do first, and I certainly recommend they try those first, because my readings are not cheap. They're not the most expensive out there, but they're not cheap either. So I really think that the same way you would go to a drugstore and buy something over the counter before you shelled out on going to an expensive specialist. If you can handle it yourself, then that's great. If not, I'm certainly happy to help anybody that thinks they have a problem that they can't solve. A lot of times I've had people come to me like in those circumstances and things like that. And there's always something, like you said, that thing about there was scratching on the roof. We don't necessarily know what his mother did in order to make sure he lived and the chicks didn't, because it sounds like maybe he wasn't supposed to live, or it was a bit of a rough time and the chicks went instead of him going. Right. So that's kind of tricky. And sometimes it'll be somebody, they'll just come there and whatever they've done in order to bring this situation on themselves is so bad they don't even want to tell me. So that usually makes me a little nervous too, in the sense of like, what did you do? Back to that again.
Yes, who's following you into a tarot reader's house?
Right. If it's something that sometimes it'll happen when somebody had a bad relationship or a breakup, like the situations you're talking about, that's usually easier to get off of somebody than something like we're talking about now, which seems to have been a lifelong kind of thing. So I would really have to do a reading to see what to do for the person. And then there's a variety of things we can do. Everything under the sun. I have hundreds of herbs here. They can all go into candles, oils, waters, baths, everything,
I love that. All right. So, and my people are really love readings. So everybody get a reading from Lilith. Just have a day, get a reading. Okay. Now the last question is the stupidest question, which you may just pass on. But I did an interview and someone asked me this question and it sounded like I was hemming and hawing, because in my head I was going, you did not ask me that question again. Why do psychics not win the lottery? I hate this question.
Oh, yeah. I'll roll my eyes at that one.
Exactly. I thought I'm going to ask every psychic's or tarot reader's perspective on that, because I'm trying to write a comedy bit about how they expect psychics to be perfect. We have to know everything and we have to be perfect. Otherwise, we're frauds.
I think everybody has their own talents. I'm sure. I remember seeing something about some pagan tarot readers or something that had won the lottery, and then they decided to start a business with black squirrels on the T-shirts. So it happens sometimes.
So somebody does have the numbers, not me.
Yeah. I was like, wow, look at that. So some of them do. I am not one of them. I have never had any luck with any of that kind of magic or situations or things like that. I think my talents definitely lie in other places. I had a client yesterday that came to me for a fertility situation. I've always had a lot of success with that. I had one person that didn't have an actual physical baby, but she had a miracle surprise adoption go through shortly after. So I'm very good at getting people with the little ones that they're supposed to be with. I'm good at other things too, but I'm just not particularly good at that kind of magic. I've tried lots of times, and I think it's about focus. I remember early on in my career, probably about 25 years ago, I had a client that came to me and she wanted to win the lottery. She didn't want to win a lot of money. She just had a really big gas bill or electric bill or something, so she needed like $100 to pay this off. And then we did the work and she got the money. She won the lottery, but then her husband died of a heart attack the next day.
Everything's
so
betrayed.
To me, it wasn't about her, back to what you need. What she needed was to focus on her husband's health and that situation, not I need $100 for the gas bill and I have to win the lottery in order to get it. I also like to say there's a lot of different ways to get money. Do you have to win the lottery, or could you get a raise at work, or could you get an inheritance from someone you've never met, or could you find a bag of money on the street that some mobsters dropped? There's a lot of different ways to get money if you need it. So just because somebody isn't very good at casino magic or lottery ticket magic, chances are they're good at some kind of financial or money magic that'll allow them to get what they need.
That's perfect. And I always say, because people are always like, hey, can you give me the lottery numbers? And I was like, if I had the lottery numbers, I would not be giving them to you. I would be in a much bigger office. Well, Lilith, thank you so much for coming on. Such a pleasure. I bet you took the fear out of a lot of things for many people. Tell everyone where they can find you, about your books, workshops, where they get readings. Let everybody know where they can get more of you.
All right. They can find out about all of that stuff on my website, lilithdorsey.com. They can find information on my blog, Voodoo Universe. I'm doing a lot of online events because that's what we do these days this summer. So if you check out my blog or my social media, you'll find out which ones those are going to be. There's also going to be a free class coming up sometime soon for Orishas, goddesses, and voodoo queens. And there'll also be some more in-depth paid classes that people can find out. So just check my website. If you want to get a free copy of the book, sign up for my mailing list. You can do that by emailing me at voodoouniverse@yahoo.com. So there you go.
Fantastic. And folks, check out her YouTube channel. I loved it. I think I could have watched it all night long. I probably will tonight. Thank you, Lilith. Everybody, thanks to Mike at Uno Rising Media for taking care of my podcast. Everybody, like I said, if you can sign up for my email list or follow me on Instagram at Rontowski, we will see you next week.